Kia ora Kiwi and welcome to 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We do 30 minutes, one guest and no cut. So what we record is what you get. Well, imagine what you would do if a massive force of Russian soldiers invaded your country. And that's the reality, of course, for Ukraine, which has spent more than 3 years countering Vladimir Putin's invasion. But what if this was someone else's war? New Zealand man Jordan O'Brien has been in Ukraine pretty much since the beginning. He's now on the front line as a drone operator battling the Russian forces. Why is he fighting a war half a world away? And what can he teach us about the way that war is waged today in a world of drones, AI and high-stakes negotiations between Presidents Putin and Trump? Let's start the clock. 30 minutes with Jordan O'Brien. Jordan O'Brien, thank you so much for coming on 30. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me on.
Let's just start by anchoring this in time and place. Tell us where you are and day to day what you're doing.
So currently I'm in the city of Kharkiv. It's in the last 7 months, we've sort of jumped, 8 months now, we've jumped all over the place. We've been all around the country in 5 different oblasts or regions, including inside Russia itself in the Kursk region. And it's been crazy. We're not part of the International Legion. We're in a completely Ukrainian unit. So it's very busy. It's, I would say, a lot more hectic than some of the international units. There's a lot more sort of structure and it's a bit more regimented in terms of what they do. And so it's been flat out, but we really enjoy that. Our little team that we have, we really enjoy it. It's especially when it comes to the drone work, there's always work. 85% of Russian casualties are attributed to drones. And so we wanted to be, it wasn't more about dealing as much death and destruction as possible as it was staying with the cutting edge, because if you understand the latest technology on the battlefield, you have more of an edge, and well, you need that to stay alive. The more of an edge you have, the better chances of it surviving you have. So it's us day in, day out, pretty much.
So where do you operate as a drone operator from on a day-to-day basis?
It varies. For example, when we went into, before we invaded Kursk region in Russia, we were based in the Chernihiv region and we were flying missions across the border into Russia, and it's just harassing their sort of border points where they amass troops. If we see military vehicles or transport convoys, you know, we'll hit them. Just sort of going for those targets of opportunity, but that was just cross-border, right? As in flying drones across the border. But then we went into Russia itself, and we were spearheading assaults. We were there with the main assault groups as we were attacking, taking villages and attacking tree lines full of Russian soldiers. And we were right there with the troops, flying drones, because we needed that info. Communications were very poor. And so sometimes you had to be there with the assaulters, with the stormtroopers, in order to get actual information and make sure we were striking the right targets. Because when you're flying a drone, the video footage is not exactly 4K resolution at all times. And sometimes you can't distinguish friend from foe. So you need that, you need to be up close with the guys to be able to distinguish targets and know exactly where we need to fly and what we need to hit.
We'll talk a little bit more about the invasion into Kursk in a few minutes, but there's been a lot of talk about a ceasefire. We've seen Presidents Trump and Putin and the Europeans and Zelensky all trying to nut out what might happen if we get to a ceasefire. But from what you seem to be saying, there's no reduction in the intensity of the fighting at the moment?
None at all. It only ever escalates when they start talking, when the word ceasefire gets thrown around. It's like we anticipate, more swarms of drones in terms of the long-range drones hitting our cities, and we do the same to them. We smash their oil production facilities and anything we can to hinder their war machine. So, yeah, it's quite funny. The word ceasefire is almost a connotation for elevated attacks on both sides. Yeah, that's just how it is here. So ceasefire doesn't mean too much to us.
The US, for a time, withdrew intelligence sharing with Ukraine. They seem to have restored that, but that position seems to bounce around a little bit. Did that have an impact at all on what you are doing and what you're seeing?
For us, especially in the drone units, we're able to, we don't just do, our group in particular is an FPV group. So we're there to smash targets, but we also have aerial reconnaissance, drones just flying over, having a look where they are. So we get quite a good sight picture. We're responsible for the sight picture on the ground. But of course, the US has much better technology and all the toys. So not having their intelligence, it definitely hurts, but we do have the ability to just carry on and do what we were doing before, and we can still get the info we need. But of course, having the US on our side, giving us that fresh intel, it helps immensely.
Let's just go back a little bit and learn a little bit about you and why you went there and what your background is. You served for a number of years in the New Zealand Defence Force, right? Tell us a little bit about your military training.
So yeah, I spent, would have been all up about 6 years, New Zealand Army. I was actually a logistician for the vast majority of my career. I was attached to a first-line unit, Queen Alexandra's Mounted Rifles, based in Linton, Camp Palmerston North. And so there was, we're up the front with the combat guys, learning how they operate and, how we support them in a combat role. And that training, so all that first-line logistics, being right up there with the war fighters, understanding how logistics works, not from the back, but from the very front when you're actually supposed to be with the warfighters in the actual sort of the thick of it, so to speak. It helped a lot here. I notice in a lot of previous sort of engagements and previous missions how that logistical thinking has benefited us. But yeah, I wasn't a warfighter by any means. It wasn't until after I left the New Zealand Army I started to think, how can I I deployed to Iraq in 2017 as part of the training mission, to train the Iraqis when they were fighting ISIS. And I really enjoyed the environment. I enjoyed being overseas. I think the pinnacle of being a soldier is deploying overseas on operations. That's what every soldier should aspire. And what most of us aspire to do is go on a deployment. It's the pinnacle of soldiering. And I decided I really enjoyed it. And so later I ended up leaving the New Zealand Army because, of course, deployments for our little nation are few and far between ever since Afghanistan, the missions died off. And I went contracting with the American firm Constellus, so private contracting back in Iraq. Again, wanted that environment, really enjoyed being overseas. And that just sort of, COVID really impacted any future opportunities at that time. So I came back to NZ, worked at the US Embassy, doing in a security role there. And eventually, of course, the war broke out. And within a few days, the Russians were so close to the capital of Kyiv, it looked like it was game over from, the first 2 weeks. My family was like, "Well, what's your take on this?" Being the military man in the family, and I was like, "Oh, this is done. I mean, look, they're inside the capital city. This is a game, set, match." And then of course a couple of weeks went by. The Ukrainian defense was proving very fierce, and they actually pushed the Russians out of Kyiv. And then I started to think, these guys have actually got a chance. I packed up a bunch of medical equipment. I have a friend in NZ who he has his own medical company. Purchased a bunch of medical kit from him, chucked it in my old army duffel bag from my prior deployment. And I was like, I'm just going to go over, see if I can find a unit and just give this, like I just want to help. And once of course the news in New Zealand started reporting what was taking place and the atrocities that were taking place inside the cities, the occupied cities, and even the non-occupied cities, the ones that were just being relentlessly smashed with rockets, I was like, I want to go. I want to do something to help. It didn't matter what it was, but I'm just going to get over there and just do what I can.
So initially you had a training role, I understand, and were training some of the Ukrainian territorial forces, I think it was. And then you joined the Dark Angels of Ukraine. What are they?
So I believe they still exist, but back then, in the early days of the war, I'd done training for a few months, non-paid roles and then a paid role with a British firm in Kyiv. And then I was like, look, I've got all these skills, I've been doing this training, and your heart starts to be really into it all. And the ultimate test now is to go and fight. I had the means to stay in Ukraine. I had money in the bank account, and Ukraine's quite a cheap place to live. So I was like, I can stay here for a lot longer. And now the only other thing I could do to really help is to join the fight. And so one of my friends, actually, who I'd met in Lviv, he was a Dark Angel. And he said, oh man, you want to get into fighting? Come down here. No contracts, no pay, just attached to this particular unit. I believe it was the 28th Mechanized Brigade down in Mykolaiv region in the south. And that city had just repelled the Russians. And so they were sort of halfway between Mykolaiv and Kherson city. And it was just a matter of keeping the Russians at bay and hunting them down and trying to destroy them. So we jumped in with the Dark Angels, and that's what we started to do. We started to hunt in Russian armoured vehicles.
How have the Ukrainians embraced you? What do they make of a Kiwi coming halfway across the world to fight with them?
Well, the first thing that sticks out is the red beard. They're always like, "Where the hell do you come from?" You know, like, what is this red beard about? And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a Kiwi, but I got Irish roots, so that's where the red comes from." It's always the beard that catches their eye first. It's always the first talking point. But the Ukrainian people are incredible. They have been so hospitable. We'd go out with them on the front lines, and they couldn't believe this. Was, of course, near the start of the war. Now they're used to us. At the start of the war, they couldn't believe that foreigners from, some of these Ukrainians had actually been to New Zealand. Some of them worked on cargo ships and had been through New Zealand. Like, you came all the way from New Zealand to fight for us. It's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, but it's got to be done. It's the fight is here, and it's not just about Ukraine and Russia. This is an existential threat to all of Europe, which leads on to a threat to the rest of the world. If we don't stop it here, there's no telling what could happen. So, incredible people.
Let's talk about Russia a little bit. They recently sentenced you to 14 years in jail and a fine of 1.3 million rubles, or about 20k New Zealand. What's your response to that?
Well, as one of the New Zealand newspapers put it, lol, which was my initial reaction when I saw it. I was actually in Kursk at the time. We had our Starlink set up, and a friend of mine, his partner is Ukrainian, and she messaged and she said, oh, has Obi seen this? Showed me, and I saw that I'd been sentenced in absentia, and I laughed, and then of course read the charges, and it was a good laugh. But I'd thought about this prior. This wasn't like a shock to me. It does happen eventually to all of us. And I believe we were at least at the start, those first 3 months that we were there, we were the only foreigners there. And so they needed a scapegoat. They want to show any other foreigners who dare invade Russia, this is what's going to happen. So as I understand it, there's now a bunch of countries I can't go to. But I took a look at the list. It's nowhere I'm ever going to go anyway. Vietnam, okay. Venezuela, North Korea.
Yeah.
No need.
What is your experience of Russian soldiers, of who they are, what their motivations are for fighting? I mean, presumably you've come across Russian prisoners at some points, possibly. What can you tell us about them and about why they're fighting and what their circumstances are?
It's funny you say that, because when we first crossed the river in the south, our battalion was the first to cross the river and start attacking the left bank Russian positions there. And we were up against the cream of the crop, Russian soldiers who really believe in their fight and in their country, and none of them were mobilized. These are career soldiers, and we had some tough fights against them there. And fortunately, all of our guys made it out of those fights. So we've fought against the best of the best. We've fought against the real tough cream of the crop of the Russians, but also we've seen the mobilized guys. And one of them we actually spoke to. Our commander was like, you want to speak to a Russian? And we're like, okay, yeah, of course, why not? Young guy, he'd been busted with a small bag of marijuana on a bus in Moscow. And it was either go to jail for, I can't remember how many years they said they were going to give him, or you join the army and you go to the front, and they told him he was going to be an artilleryman up the back, fire the big guns, you'll never see the enemy, it's all good. Okay, they're all on a truck, him and a bunch of other guys, would-be convicts, and some officer pulls them off close to their position and says, you guys are coming with me. They all get their kit, and then he said, the Ukrainians are that way, I need you to find out exactly where, and he just sent them on an assault, 15 guys. Two of our guys, Ukrainians from our battalion at the time, this was in Turney, which is in the Le Mans sector out in the east. Two of our guys captured the entire group because, of course, they started to attack. We saw them instantly, smashed them with mortars and artillery and drones, and they all just gave up. They threw down their weapons and they were just crawling towards us, and two of our guys came out of one of their positions and captured them all. And it's just like, we're talking to this young guy, and he would have been better off taking the jail sentence. Well, no, actually, because we caught him. So he now gets fed and, food, water, a place to sleep, and eventually he'll probably be part of a prisoner swap. But while he's with us, he's safe, safer than he would be in a Russian prison, or, well, alternatively, what could have happened on the battlefield. He could have been smashed by an artillery round or anything. That was our one experience talking to a Russian POW.
Let's talk a bit about drone warfare, because this really has been one of the things that has sort of fanned out in terms of the way that war is waged today. I mean, there's an estimation in a piece I was reading in the New York Times that maybe 70% of the deaths and casualties on the battlefield are as a result of drones. And drones, do they now rule the battlefield?
Yeah, it's always said that artillery is the king of battle, and that's always been true, and still, in some sense, it is. But it's slowly losing that rep to drones. And it's funny because even I remember on my deployment to Iraq in 2017, we got issued a little a 9-liner card, and that was to call in drones, because ISIS was like, oh, we can make these cheap drones, put on an explosive payload, and drop them into camps. Never happened to us where we were near Baghdad, but that threat had just emerged. And then we come to Ukraine, and still FPVs weren't a big thing in terms of, FPV drones weren't a big thing, but there was limited sort of numbers.
Sorry to interrupt, but what is an FPV drone?
So FPV just means first person view. So it's, if you see the drone operators wearing the goggles, you fly a drone from first-person view, and it'll have an explosive payload attached, and you're directly hitting a vehicle, a position, or enemy troops, as opposed to dropping payloads, which is how it all started. So a drone just flies over the top, have a payload underneath with a release mechanism, push a button on the controller, and you drop like a bomber, like an old school plane dropping bombs or something. That's the difference between the two. FPVs took them a little longer to sort of enter the game. I remember a time when we could sleep under the stars and not even worry about drones. But now, of course, you don't dare show your face because there's something watching you. There's something with a camera that's watching you. So now it's just they truly do rule the battlefield. And like you say, these statistics, it's anywhere between 70 to 85% of all casualties on the battlefield here in Ukraine is attributed to drones.
And that's what you're doing. You're hunting out Russian targets with these drones. What is that like? Because there's distance, isn't there? There's a very big difference, I suppose, psychologically too, right? Between you and I doing battle face to face, or, at least in the traditional sense, and operating remotely a drone. How do you think and feel about that?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I've done both jobs. I started in a reconnaissance role, and I've been within, several score meters of enemy, been in intense gunfights with them back when we used to have to seek out and close with, the infantry motto. And we've been up close. And so having been there and done that, and then later been given the opportunity to go to drones, of course we took it, because as I said earlier, any way you can upskill in warfare is a benefit. It increases your survivability, knowing more and understanding more about the weapons used. And so getting into drones, of course, we get all the flack online. People say, "Oh, you're cowards. You sit up the back and you hide and you fly your little drones." But this is warfare. I'm not about trying to look like the bravest man on the battlefield running at Russian trenches. I can kill more Russians, and that's what I'm here to do. That is the job. There's no sugarcoating it. We are here to end lives, and with drones, it's much easier. It is much easier, and of course, the death rate on the battlefield has skyrocketed because of the use of drones. So it's a better way for me to do my job. There's no sugarcoating it. That's just how it is.
And what's it like to be on the other side of that, to be hunted by swarms of drones? Because they're like snipers in the sky, really, aren't they? That
whirring noise that a drone makes, as the propellers, the propellers in the sky, that's nightmare fuel. That sends shivers down your spine. Even when you hear guys just practicing with them, you hear that noise, and it reminds you of every single night you've spent out on the battlefield, just listening and praying that thermal camera has not picked up a heat signature off of you. And so I've been on the receiving end of an FPV attack as well. About 50 meters away, it exploded. This was in Russia itself. We need a direct line of sight between us and sort of where we're going. We can't sit in the trees because it interferes with the signal for FPV. So we need to be outside of tree lines, fully exposed to the elements in most cases. In this particular case, we needed that. And this FPV came flying past, and I say fortunately, it was going for one of my mates, but fortunately it went straight past us and smashed into the cluster of trees where our friend was. So I've been on the receiving end, and I've also done a lot of dealing out the FPVs, and it's not fun. The sound of a drone coming towards you is just horrific.
So this would have been one of presumably several near-death experiences you've had. Have you had some pretty close shaves? Have you?
Some very close calls, very, very close calls. Some days you wake up and it does instill you with a joy. Like now it does, because I realize what I've been through and what I've survived. But of course, you keep dancing around the fire, eventually you're going to get burnt. So it's almost not a matter of if, it's always a matter of when. But yeah, it's like I say, being a drone operator and having been what they call a scout over here, but it's a reconnaissance role. It never gets easier. Some people, if people say it gets easier, the feeling, it really doesn't. It never, your nerves are always on edge, and you've just got to battle through because you've got a job to do. You're not just fighting to keep yourself alive. You've got your mates on the left and the right of you, and it doesn't get easier, but we're committed. We're committed, and our hearts are fully in it. And so it is what it is, but it's never, the horror never truly goes away, and the fear is always with you, always.
You seem very, very energized about this, though. This is about, is it about adrenaline? Is it about commitment? Is it about a deeper cause? What is it that drives you to do this?
Adrenaline is only in the moment when you are in the thick of it and the artillery is landing all around you. You can hear jets, and 9 times out of 10, they're not Ukrainian, they're Russian jets. And you know they've seen you, and you just got to hope that guided munition, the coordinates are a little bit off. And fortunately, all the times on our positions around the country, they've been off. But it's in terms of what drives you, it's just, we have to win this. We know what Russia is. If you're a student of history, or you have any sort of understanding of history, you know what Russia is. You look what they did to Chechnya. They lost the first war against Chechnya, and then they came back the second time and they just leveled the country, and they just committed ruthless atrocities. And we know what's in store for us because we're going through it right now. And any sort of bullshit peace settlement, we know it's not going to be lasting. Russia is not the kind to just roll over and accept some sort of half-assed victory. They need all or nothing. That is, their entire existence is based upon their victory in World War II. I've seen it inside Russia. I've been to a Russian school. I've seen how they, everything, the entire school is like a museum for the Second World War. Their entire belief as a people is victory at all costs. And the greatest thing you can do, it's almost like the Spartans of old, the greatest thing you can do is give your life in defense of the motherland. It's scary to see because that's what we're fighting. We are fighting a fanatical enemy, but also an extremely servile, subservient enemy to their masters.
If there was a peace deal done at some point, there's been talk of the New Zealand Defence Forces going in as some sort of peacekeeping force. How equipped, from what you know of the NZDF, would we be to fulfil that role?
In terms of, I suppose if NZDF goes in, it's obviously there's a lot of countries that'll be sending their guys in, and they'll be assigned a city or a sector or something like that. Now, we might not be the most equipped army in the world, NZ this is, but I've worked all around the globe with soldiers from so many different countries, and I still stand by my words that the Kiwis are the best overall. Small, tight-knit bunch, work together really well, and really good guys who know what they're doing, and incredible soldiers. So I know the Kiwis will make do with whatever they've got and will do a good job if they are ever sent here. But yeah, the Kiwis have always been that force to not have so much, but to be able to achieve wonders. We saw that in the First and the Second World War. We have a very long storied history of, supporting conflicts. Afghanistan as well, Vietnam too, volunteers over there. We've always been highly regarded by our peers that are far superior to us, like the US and Britain, or that. They always extol our virtues, and so I know Kiwi soldiers, if they are sent to Ukraine, they'll do a hell of a job with whatever tools they're given, and they'll make it work, and they'll be a good peacekeeping force, as they have been in the past.
Have you met other New Zealanders doing what you're doing over there? I know that Dominique Abelin, who was on leave from the NZDF, was killed in 2022 in Donetsk, I think it was. Have you met and experienced other Kiwis over there?
Spoken to quite a few Kiwis. I've spoken to about 5 or 6 different Kiwis here, some in civilian roles, volunteers, as well as military guys. And I didn't know Dom at all. Never spoken to him. But I was contacted after he was killed, and there was a team being put together, and they said, well, you're a Kiwi, do you want to jump in the team? There was a British guy I'd worked with, and he was very good mates with Dom, and he said, mate, do you want to jump on board? And I was like, yeah, man, if there's a chance to bring Kiwi back, 100%. But Kane Tatai, we'd spoken online on Instagram and stuff, but I never met him again. So we knew each other, just through social media. And then, of course, he tragically was killed as well. But I haven't actually met any Kiwis on the ground yet, just spoken to some of them online.
And is it your commitment to stay until the fighting finishes?
And perhaps even beyond. New Zealand's very far away from the rest of the world, having lived there all my life and having been on so many long-distance flights. I would like to stay close to Europe. I enjoy Europe, and I would like to stay here and hopefully after the war get myself back into an instructing role. Drones are the future of warfare, and they are only going to become bigger and badder, and I want to keep the knife edge sharp, so to speak, and stay involved. There's a lot of tech companies in Ukraine. I'd like to help them. I've actually had a bunch of civilian job offers already, companies that are looking, for experienced pilots to test their products and so on. And I think, I'll try and make a career out of that for as long as I can, just to, again, staying at the cutting edge. And depending on the circumstances of the end of this war, who knows? There may be more fighting in the future, depending on the outcome of this war, whether it's some peace settlement or whatever the case may be. So I would like to, I feel very committed to this country now. And I can't see myself leaving until I know this thing is done for good.
Does doing what you're doing mean that the NZDF is closed to you? I mean, how do they respond to people who go off and fight, in other than a state-sanctioned role, I suppose?
So I haven't actually had any sort of like dealings with NZDF while I've been here. I know there was, I think it was near the start of the war or in 2023, there was a spokesperson of the NZDF who came out and had to just put a blurb out that he's not in the NZDF anymore because obviously Dom was on leave. And so that raised the question of, are the Kiwis, there's always the conspiracy theorists who believe that we've been sent here on some secret government mission, like the NZ government has sent us here. I don't know, some James Bond type role or whatever, which absolutely is not true. But obviously, because Dom was on leave, questions started to be asked about, are these guys actually still in? And again, why are they there on leave? Who sent them there? Of course, there has to be someone. We have no free will. Someone must have sent us here, type thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, just about a minute left to go, Jordan. But if I could ask you, if you were to, let's just say you were to come home tomorrow or to finish what you're doing now, what is the image that would stay with you from this experience?
The image is the blinding flash of light that almost killed me. I wear a piece of a rocket that almost took my life and the lives of two of my mates. This was on the island this was one of the islands as we crossed the river, our first mission across the river, and the Russians knew we were there and they gave us hell. And we got into a gunfight the next day, but they softened up our position first with this rocket, and it was like 2 a.m. and I was on watch, and I didn't even hear it come in. It just hit the ground, and it was just a blinding flash of light, and then I'm laying on my back and sort of come to and realize my mates are probably gone. Fortunately, we all survived. Absolute miracle. So it's a blinding flash of light. That's the image that stays in my head, and I think about that often. Just how close. It's just a constant reminder. Never give in to complacency, because we can die at any minute here.
All right. Well, look, best of luck. And again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. That was Jordan O'Brien. It was 30 minutes with Jordan O'Brien. This is 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We'll catch you next time. Ka kite.